You are listening to MEDIALEX Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky.
MEDIALEX is a platform for community-created programming. The views and opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the voices on air. They do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of MEDIALEX or its board of directors, nor JustFundKY or its board of directors. You are listening to MEDIALEX Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky. I am your host, Mark Royse, and tonight is a very special presentation sponsored by JustFundKY of The Deep End. And it's a show where we are talking about complex issues that are of interest to the LGBTQ plus community. And I've got a great group of guests tonight. We have Kyle May, who is the owner and founder of Open Doors Counseling. Wanda McCants will be joining us. She's the clinical director and therapist. Corabelle Hall, drag artist, case manager, and possibly queer mystic. We'll find out. Reverend Rainbow Weldon, spiritual director of Queer Spirit Collective. Logan Kidwell-Lemons, who is the Woven Church director associated with Beaumont Presbyterian. We'll find out more about that too. And then later in the program, we'll be joined by Emma Curtis, who is the 4th District Councilwoman of Lexington. She's also an independent filmmaker and an LGBTQ plus activist. So welcome, everybody. How are you? Everybody feeling good? Everybody here?
Yes.
All right. So everybody gets kind of familiar with voices. I'm going to go around and just have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So Reverend Rainbow, you're up first.
Hello, everyone. I am Rainbow. Happy to be here.
Hi.
And my name is Logan. I'm really excited to be with you all.
My name's Corabelle, and I'm so excited to be here.
My name is Kyle, and I'm excited to be here too, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, I am super happy to have you all. This is a conversation that we started talking about a month ago, and so I'm interested to see where it goes. For those of you tuning in, we'll have 3 sort of sections to the program, and we're going to start out with talking about identity, shame, and self-love, because we've got mental health professionals here, we have spiritual directors here, so we're going to be talking about identity, spirit, substance abuse, faith, religion. It's kind of going to go in all sorts of interesting places. But for the first question to kick us off, there is, for anyone who's been paying attention, explicit homophobia and transphobia in our current news and politics. So let's start with the people you're seeing, your clients, on a day-to-day basis. How is that atmosphere affecting folks? Who wants to jump in? Kyle, you want to start us?
Yeah, for me, I see a lot of fear from the clients that I serve, and I've been specializing with the queer community for several years now, going on 6 years, as of June, actually, our birthday anniversary. And from what I've been hearing lately, there's so much less hope than there was in the past. And, you know, I've seen a big shift in how safe people feel about reaching out for services. And there's this lack of hope, and, you know, people are losing resources. I've been seeing a lot of evictions or job loss, or just, you know, everyone's just in survival mode at the moment, it seems. So for me, that's what I've been seeing. And I don't know if Corabelle, if you've seen the same, but, you know, I've been seeing that almost every day when I meet with my clients.
Because I have to completely agree with you on that. It's been really challenging to kind of reinstill hope in our community, because it is, a lot of people have that lack of hope, and like, what are we going to do now? And then also that's where we're seeing a rise in some spirituality at play that is making people feel a whole lot more uncomfortable. And so that was another thing. There's starting to be a divide within religious sects. And so it's like, what is really going on right now? And like, what is really happening? And it's challenging, because also trying to help be that example and like be that leader. Especially whenever I'm going through it too. Like that's the thing that has been so challenging. Like the insurances, it was wild. Just some of the prices that I've had to pay and just some of my hormone replacement therapy. It's crazy. And so like trying to tell the clients like, and even my friends like, hey, but I'm going through it too. And like still trying to smile and has been quite challenging.
Yeah, it's certainly an environment where I think you can't maintain a professional distance totally because we're all in it together. So I want to come over to the spiritual side of the room. They're divided, mental health versus spirituality. And I want to ask you all, what are your, parishioners, followers, people that are congregations, what are you hearing from them?
So as someone who I went to college to get a degree in specifically Christian ministry and education as a queer person. So I feel like my whole life kind of flipped on its head because of that. And I think tragically, because I graduated from college like in 2012, so it's been a minute and it's not getting better. I think people are really... they're looking for something higher than themselves. And although I think there's a lot of love in spiritual centers and things, I don't know that it is fully giving people a deep sense of identity, because a lot of religion kind of demands you abandon that. I happen to not be in a space that has that demand, but there's that pressure in people's minds because we're creatures of habit. And we're used to what we grew up with. So I'm seeing, just to echo what they said, people who are really looking for something a little bit deeper in spirituality. It's why I'm excited with what Rainbow's doing.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there and say, for me, definitely like the air feels thick. And it is very hard on the community, our queer community, especially when religion is used so much as the reason for so much hate. And that's a whole other discussion because it's not even founded. Logan probably knows more about that theology than me. I am more spiritually braced and less religious, but it really drove me to want to create a space specifically for queer folks. And this is a new collective, just started a few months ago, really born out of these times and for that reason. Because
and
I was
tell us a little bit more about it. Queer Spirit Collective.
Queer Spirit Collective, yes. And it was very important to me that I had the word queer in the name because I wanted to be explicit with who we are. So seeing even in more progressive spaces and churches and spiritual centers, there is definitely still a divide. And what people may say is, we don't want to be political and various things. And my stance is now is the time more than ever to take a stand. And I see people seeking belonging and community and to be honored and valued and seen and not just tolerated or even accepted. So many places now, churches go, oh, you're accepted here. But I want to create a space where queer folks are leading and having that perspective and that voice forward in the world of spirituality, and a space for people to come together and explore various spiritual topics and practice together and ritual and community, and not have our gender orientation, sexuality, any aspects that we may consider in our lives queer, be just a sideline, but actually be the forefront of the conversation and how we look at the intersection of gender and sexuality and spirituality and how they all interplay in some way.
And I think that unto itself is such a rich and complex topic that we're going to dive into as we get further into the program. And it's super juicy, and that's why we're saving it for last, because I want to kind of talk about these other things, which absolutely still encompass what everybody's talking about. But I'm trying to sort of start, my thought process is let's start talking about the individual and kind of then moving out to community and all of that. So, to this end, that there's all this kind of hostile, violent rhetoric going on, I think about people who are maybe still navigating the coming out process. They're not out. So I'd like to hear from everyone's experience, if they're comfortable sharing. Was there a point when your struggle with identity or your sexuality or gender sort of moved into a place kind of self-hatred, or moved out of a place of self-hatred into more kind of understanding and openness? And what was that process like for y'all? Kai or Corbett, jump in.
Yeah. So, it just comes to my mind quickly because I'm writing a book about this topic. So, I remember going through that phase in my life where I hated myself, and, I didn't want to, have a life, basically. Like, there was no reason to be here, is kind of how I felt for many years. And, being from Eastern Kentucky, I was limited with community. I had some supportive people in my life because there are allies there and there are other queer people there. But when I was living there, it was hard to find other people and have a community, build connections, or even know that someone else was nearby, So I eventually moved to Lexington, and that's where I was able to start finding community and belonging. And I started visiting the gay bars, which, most people do. And that's one of the first suggestions you hear when you're like, how can you meet people here? And they always say, go to one of the bars. So I spent some time there and quickly learned that probably was not my favorite place to be, to meet people. So I started going to spiritual places, but also that was hard because I was raised Christian and Pentecostal and had religious trauma, so I had to work through that. But what really helped me, I think, was going to my therapist and working through my own issues. For a long time, I really wasn't doing that work and probably should have been way sooner. But, at some point I was like, I keep saying to everyone else, hey, you should get a therapist. Or, so I finally was like, well, let me do that and start working through some of my issues. And it kind of put me on this path to start realizing how much I hated myself. Like, it's not just not loving myself. It was, I hate myself for many years.
And that's a super intense thing that I don't think that people who are not queer quite understand. I'm sure that there are straight people who hate themselves for various reasons, but that kind of core of my essence of who I am is somehow wrong, and having to deal with that, especially when you're hormonal as a teenager and all that and trying to figure things out. Corabelle, were you going to say something?
Yes, I can. To echo to what Kyle said, I feel that on such a whole level. I laugh because it's like I had two coming out stories. I came out once as gay, and then I came out again as trans. And it was so wild because my entire life I was so embraced with like all of this, what I thought was love, and it was actually performance. And it kind of made me so sad because I felt like I couldn't be me. But if I would do all of these deeds, if I would go and I would help people, if I would go to church, if I would learn every single Bible verse, if I would, follow the steps, that's why I really do believe I was baptized in 2001, because I was afraid that I didn't want to burn down in hell.
I totally understand that, and I'll jump over to you all, but let me just interject here for myself. I grew up Southern Baptist in the long time ago, because I'm old, and it was during the AIDS epidemic. So we were hearing from the pulpit all sorts of hell and brimstone about how, the plague was here for the folks. And my sort of response, I think, because somewhere I'm kind of a naturally compassionate person, and I really had a strong spiritual yearning at that point. I was like, well, I'm going to become a minister despite what's going on so that I can, at least if I can't save myself, I can save somebody else. I can help other people. And so that was the weird, twisted way that I got into, a Southern Baptist university studying religion and ended up with a degree in theater. But that's another story. What about you all? Logan?
Yeah. So it's interesting how I instinctively knew knowing that I was queer growing up, my instincts knew this is not safe to talk about. No one had to tell me to not talk about it. My instincts told me. So that was like kind of like one of my earliest things is like, huh. And so it's like then being churched and wanting to pursue that, they gave me this sense of like, oh, you have a family. Except for what we talked about at the beginning is you have to abandon your identity completely because you're not what you say you are. You're this child of God and all of that language, which is just so deceptive and really not Christian at all if we actually think about it. But that's what you go to any mainline denomination, you're going to hear something pretty similar to that. And so I totally crashed in 2014 where I started living this secret double life, trying to do the church thing and trying to figure out who Logan really was. It completely caught up with me. I made a ton of messy mistakes, tragically, and my life completely crashed. And so since then, I've been doing this really beautiful untangling. And so I'm pretty protective about any kind of religion or spirituality because I think anything that takes people away from who they really are just isn't worth pursuing.
Rainbow, tell us your perspective.
Yeah, I notice sometimes I hesitate because I had a very different experience and I can sometimes feel bad talking about it because I had a positive experience. But then I realize, no, these are the stories we need to be telling more of because I was just sitting here with my own little inner dialogue about this. And I grew up in the suburb of Atlanta and went to a spiritual center in downtown Atlanta with an out gay minister in the 80s and 90s. And I had gay youth teachers, and I remember the AIDS epidemic and the impact that had on me as a young child with some of my youth teachers dying and going to visit them in the hospital. And my mom, at that time, that was pretty radical to bring a child to the hospital with someone dying from AIDS. So I really credit my parents a lot for a very different upbringing. And yet, my more extended family, some of my dad's family specifically was Southern Baptist. And the waters I was swimming in all around me were this more Christian conservative world. And yet I had this family life with my parents. I'm an only child, so like my parents and then my Sunday experience being very different and trying to reconcile that. So I realized later, as much as I had wonderful role models of what it was like to be out and gay and spiritual, I noticed more recently that I started to unpack some shame around it because I, like Logan said, you still feel it from the environment all around you. And so it was kind of like a secret or, I still noticed I had some shame around it, even though I had wonderful role models and an example that most people didn't. So I wasn't ever told I was a sinner. Well, some friends and various people later, but no, we love you. Hate the sin, love the sinner, that whole thing. And it's interesting also because I came out when I moved to Chicago as a young adult. And so even though I was around a lot of gay folks, it still kind of took my own journey to figure that out for myself. And it's an evolution. I feel like I'm still coming out around various aspects of my identity as I learn and grow, and hopefully we all are. So.
And we talked about that in the last session, that there's, in some ways, coming out is just an ongoing process, and your understanding of things expands and that kind of thing. So, all right, while we were talking, we were joined by Wanda McCants, who is a clinical director and therapist at Open Doors Counseling, and she's going to chime in on her experience with her coming out process and whether that involves self-hatred and sort of how you move through that and where you are with it today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's an ongoing process, I think, coming out. Because as a person of color, I think you come out in layers. You don't always come out at one time. So it's and in the same groups, it might feel a bit different because it's one part of me is very obvious. It's not going to change, but then another part of me you don't get to see, and that's privileged information at that point. So some people get that access, and some people just don't. For me, I grew up in Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama, to be specific. So it's the
South.
Yes, what I affectionately call the heart of racism. And it is, it was so much easier and so much salient, so much more salient to think about race coming up, and then going through the teenage things and going, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know. And what does this mean? And what does this mean for me? And what is this? I don't, and I'm lost. I'm by myself in this. And thankfully, I was strangely a black girl in Alabama who had access to therapy. I had that resource, thankfully, because through my sister who worked with an agency that provided therapy to the community. So I got in kind of after hours and was able to start processing some things through high school, and then dealing with that thing of like, I don't know. I feel by myself. In a way, I'm not by myself. Like, my friends can know, but my parents can't know. I've learned a long time ago. We can't talk about this.
Right.
So I don't know. It was different. It was difficult in spots, but it's interesting because I was more focused on race in high school on up through into college. Then it was about the gay stuff more into high school, into college, finding myself and being able to say I'm gay. Hey, that's cool. And now as an adult, obviously having the training wheels off for so long, it's, I'm papaw at this point.
Right.
But, it's the other layers that matter more, right? So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to ask you all about a concept that began, I think the concept was named in the Black and Brown community, but the idea of code switching, and when you're like in more progressive spiritual situations, but you're also talking to more conservative religious people, when you're talking to parents as opposed to friends, and how does that play out for the queer aspects of our personality? Anyone want to
I'll jump in just to say the hyper awareness, because sometimes we don't realize the energy expense it takes just to exist in certain spaces. And as I've been more on my own self-awareness journey, that is something I've discovered. I just got back from a family reunion and driving back from North Georgia here to Lexington, and stopping to get gas or different. And I've got all sorts of. I got my queer spirit stickers on my car. Half the time wearing my T-shirt, my short hair, and being a different. There's just an alertness that you are aware of your surroundings a lot more. And I'm. That may not exactly have been your question, but that's just one thing, and also kind of to choose or decide in each moment how much you're gonna, like you said, share or say. And this year, like with my family, and it was kind of, extended family, I showed up and I was like, I'm bringing in my water bottle with all my gay stickers on it. And, and it's just, but again, that's like a baby step in a safe-ish space, but yet some family I hadn't seen in a while, and I don't know, but yet there's enough safe people there that do know me for so long for all that. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be really
And I think Kyle mentioned it earlier as well. I think whether it's code switching or whatever you're doing, it is all this sort of navigating safety ultimately at the most basic level. Like, what is it okay to be here? And especially if you're traveling by yourself as a woman in the South and you've got queer stickers and stuff, what is the threat there? And what do you need to
Well,
be
another
aware
thing
of?
to mention, I have my daughter with me who's 10, so then there's that extra, and I noticed that too. And then it's so weird when I'm thinking about this, and it's like, oh, I almost felt safer with her because nobody, I don't know. Like, so there's the extra protection, of her being with me, but yet also it did feel a little more safe.
Yeah. What about anybody else? Hop in, Kyle.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I would always try to refrain from using pronouns when referring to a friend, or wouldn't really talk about anyone I was interested in, or now I find that it's much easier to be who I am, and I spent all those early years trying to change who I am or fight who I am and not be who I am. But now I'm trying to embrace who I am and really love who I am and flourish in that way. But I was just thinking the other day, I was on a date and we went to the park and the guy was wanting to either hold hands or cuddle on the bench or something. And first thing I thought it was, you're going to get us killed.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not ready to die in the park.
Right.
So I think that's something that others may not always have to think about. Just something as simple as showing affection or talking about who you're friends with or who's in your circle.
And we are kind of chuckling about it, but it is deadly serious.
Yeah.
You can really have harm come to you.
It is so scary because, and I'll share this, and Rainbow knows because we were actually on a little trip and we were coming back. And, as a trans individual, it just blows me away that people are just so obsessed with how we pee and, the restrooms and stuff. And so me and Rainbow had just been on this wonderful excursion and we were coming back and we were hugging. We actually hugged a tree and we were living our best life, And then we go in and it was weird because I can't remember exactly where we were, but it was like the bathroom attendant was like, you go there, you go there.
Yeah,
and
it was a rest stop.
Yeah.
So it had gendered bathrooms as we walked in. But yeah, someone there literally directing
the bathrooms. And I looked
here,
at Rainbow
here.
and Rainbow was like, huh? And we were like, what? And then so I go in and I'm like, what is happening here? And and to speak on the bathrooms, I told this one lady one time, I was like, the only reason I'm in here is just to use the bathroom, just to be a normal human being. Mm-hmm. But it gets so scary at times because honestly, I would rather be in here being assaulted by your words than being physically assaulted by your husband or
in the other
else.
bathroom.
Yeah. And it's it's so scary. And also too, I'm 6'5", and my grandpa told me growing up, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Well, you might as just well own it. Well, be careful what you wish for, Papa, because I'm owning it.
Yes.
And a lot of y'all didn't like it, but I love it, and I love myself now, and I wouldn't go back. And I think that's the thing that has been so hard is now I'm starting to see no other way of not living this my most authentic life. However, these are way different times.
Well, and I think it's important to name that because even different from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, especially with trans folks who are maybe 1 or 2% of the population, have become 98% of the moralizing by certain political stuff. And that's, at the beginning, we were talking about the explicit homophobia and transphobia and how that's impacting things. And I think that's a prime example, is just trying to do your business in peace and not being policed by random folks. So anyway, Logan.
Yeah. It's interesting to me in this climate that we're in in this era of, wow, I want to say something so inappropriate, but I'll refer to the name. In the era of Trump that we are living in, it's dawned on me, it took a textbook narcissist to wake a lot of pastors and clergy up.
Yeah.
To be aware of all of these things that we've quietly supported for decades. Oh, it paved. Oh, we were complicit in this. And so for me, it all circled to I felt like I had to be a certain person at my corporate job.
Yeah.
I had to be a different person in church. I had to be yet a different person with my family. And none of them were Logan, none of them. And so, and it's just because so many of these spaces, right, there's so much training in assume positive intent, think this way, right? And so all of a sudden, the joke, you're putting on a different hat. And next thing you know, those hats are becoming much more than a hat. It's not just a thing you wear in a moment. It's becoming now part of you. And you don't even think, I don't even consciously shift sometimes. So I love these conversations, but it's funny how quick I armor up and self-protect without even trying.
Sure. Now, I do need to jump in here and say that MEDIALEX is politically neutral, and whatever opinions are expressed here don't reflect necessarily the opinions of the organization or the board of directors.
So sorry.
No, it's fine, because we as human beings are entitled to our opinions. It just needs to be clear that we're not speaking officially on behalf of the station. And the reason I say that is because I want to come back specifically to our current president and his direct combativeness with spiritual figures. Pope Leo, most recently, but also the woman at the National Cathedral who was the pastor. And so, and then the whole sort of hyper-religious movement on the other side around Trump, the kind of messianic stuff. It's just fascinating how that bleeds into everyday life when you're working. So at any rate, I just wanted to clarify that for our listeners, that this is, we might express some opinions here, but it is our opinions and not the opinions of the organization. All right. So Wanda, do you want to jump in there at anything before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, Logan, you brought up an interesting point about having to armor up, but I think something that I've noticed is that people got really comfortable unzipping. I mean, they took the mask off, they took the hat off, they took the whole, I'm a good old boy suit off, and then they were like, we're gonna gerrymander the hell out of this. We are ready. I mean, in my home state of Alabama, supposedly they were still saying, wrap it up. The tornadoes are coming, wrap it up, because we need to disenfranchise some people. Go ahead, come on, wrap it up. We need to go ahead and make our racism known. And it's like, whoa, dude, y'all saying the quiet part out loud, and nobody's scared anymore. So the people who have been in the pulpit saying all of this stuff undercover, like, we've all known this, and not, we're just been like, well, that's why I don't go to church no more. That's why. And then we go, oh, shoot, you saying it like it was just plain. That was, and now you get to argue with the Pope. Who argues with the Pope? Like, who does that? That's amazing to me. This is something far greater than what we were prepared for. Yeah. I just watched Wanda Sykes' new special, and not to plug anything, but y'all should watch that. It is so funny. It is so funny. But she had a great point, one of many great points. She was like, y'all, I didn't even know, but I miss 2016 Trump.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I went, whoa. I do miss 2016. Oh my God, you're right. So no, that's just an interesting thing. Like, you have everybody else having to armor up, but who can see what's going on and coming, and then everybody else who's been waiting and playing the long game is like stretching and coming out of their bug suit like. Yeah, you remember Men in Black, the dude?
Yeah.
So with the stretchy, So everybody's coming out of their skin now, and it's normal.
Such a good point.
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think, here I am, Rainbow, ever the optimist, that is an important part of the evolution of consciousness, because it needs to come to the light. It's been hidden under the rug and hiding, and people doing things in dark, shadowy corners. Now they feel emboldened to talk about it. Good. Let us see what you really think. Let us know who you are, and you will not be on the right side of history. But if we keep it in the quiet corners, it can be manipulating under the surface. And I don't know that my neighbor or the baseball coach is a secret racist, homophobe. And now we're knowing, and that can help us make choices about what businesses we support, who we hang out with. Yeah. And again, it's all, I think, part of the, as the moral arc of justice is long, but it always stretches towards that, in my view, the justice and equity, and when we remember our oneness and we're all humans. And right now, people are just really in their ego and their separate-mindedness and doing things for their own selves or their own little parties or family. But that is not sustainable as a society or as a collective or on our planet. And things will change or they won't, but someone's going to come out, and I'd rather know who those people are. Loud and proud.
Well, and on that, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll dig deeper into this conversation. You are listening to The Deep End, and we've been talking about identity and shame and the current political landscape and how that affects that and how spirituality plays into it a little bit. And we'll get more into that when we come back, and we'll be back after these messages.
You are listening to MEDIALEX Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky.
MEDIALEX is a platform for community-created programming. The views and opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the voices on air. They do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of MEDIALEX or its board of directors, nor JustFundKY or its board of directors. And we are back. You are listening to The Deep End, sponsored by JustFundKY, and this is a show where we explore complex issues that affect the LGBTQ plus community. And today I am joined by Kyle May, who is the owner and founder of Open Doors Counseling, Wanda McCants, who is a clinical director and therapist at Open Doors Counseling, Corabelle Hull, who is a drag artist and case manager, and we have Reverend Rainbow Weldon, who is the spiritual director of Queer Spirit Collective, and we have Logan Kidwell-Lemons, who is the director of Woven Church, and we'll hear about that in a little bit. And we will be joined shortly by Emma Curtis, who is Lexington's 4th District Councilwoman. She's also an independent filmmaker and an LGBTQ plus activist. So that's who's at the table, and we're going to jump into the second part of our conversation. In the first segment, we were talking about identity, homophobia, transphobia, how that gets internalized, and how we navigate the world and safety trying to deal with all of that. But Kyle said something in the last segment that is a great transition, that when he moved from Eastern Kentucky to Lexington, the first place that he was told or felt like to go were the bars. And there is, I think not just here, but in general, queer social life has historically been so tied to bars and nightlife and that sort of thing. And coincidentally, LGBTQ plus people tend to have substance abuse issues at higher rates than the rest of the culture. So I want to talk about what's at play there. We've got mental health specialists, we've got spiritual folks with us, and that's the angle and the lens we're looking at here is how does substance use, substance abuse kind of inform our identity and our community morality and our community judgment of each other? What is the relationship between being queer and substance use, alcohol, drugs, whatever it might happen to be? Kyle, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. I was actually reading a book today, and it wasn't a scientific book, so, I don't know for sure if the statistic was correct or not, but it was saying that about 20% or so, 20 to 30% of the queer community has an addiction problem with substances compared to like 9% with the general population. Mm-hmm. And so from what I've seen, the queer community does want to include substance use in a lot of social situations, and whenever they come together and do certain things like parties or whatever. Being from Eastern Kentucky, it was always food for us, so that was a little different. When I moved here and saw that most gay guys or the queer community doesn't even want to go to dinner together, that was a big shock to me.
Right.
So I think that they put a lot of emphasis and value on the substances because of one, depression, two, social anxiety. It helps people loosen up and be able to have conversations and meet people, or just general anxiety. Three, trauma. And another part that I had to wake up to is the spiritual part. Like, I realized for me, it was a spiritual problem that needed a spiritual solution, which is what set me on my path to reconcile with spirituality, because I knew that if I did not work on that, I would never be able to heal and work on that relationship with substances.
All right. I think that makes a lot of sense. Anybody else want to talk about, Wanda?
Okay, substance use in the queer community. I did all of the things that Kyle said. But one thing, you mentioned morality, and something that I noticed as an observer of people. Far too often I hear about people being roofied in the bars, and we're already trying to be loose, have fun, go see a show, meet some people, maybe talk to somebody interesting, and then you hear about somebody's terrible story, terrible time, having a drink that got dosed in some kind of way, or somebody finding out later, they bar hop and then find out later, oh man, I got roofied. What? I thought that would never happen to me. I thought that would never happen. Why would somebody do that? And I do question that, because it's like, we're all in this together, right? We're supposed to be on the same team. And then who taught some of these people to be predators? Who said this was okay? And then who is supposed to police this? Because, I know, it's like, I'm not valuable as a lesbian. I'm not valuable as a lesbian in the gay man bar. My drink probably won't get dosed. It might. I don't know that. But at the same time, I worry about my friend who might be a little wobbly, and I miss it. I don't know what happens when you go home, actually. And it's scary to think about that, because as a therapist, you go, whoa, that's what we're dealing with too. But we have no guardrails when it comes to that. And I don't know what the responsibilities of the bars are as a whole, or what our leaders' role in that are, the people who make a difference. And I don't mean politicians, I mean us in the community that are influential people that say, this is not okay, because otherwise, what we're going to say, silence is compliance. So that, I don't mean, but point is, like, that's the morality issue of, we're in this together, and at the same time, we have to be guarded. We have to watch some of our own.
And I think I think especially depending on what particular bar, there are commercial interests in play, because the bars might be central. There might be trafficking of all sorts of things going on there, and it just kind of goes with the territory sometimes. I want to jump in with one thing, and then I want to say hello to our new guest who just walked in. But when I mention morality, what I find very interesting is Lexington is, in general, a hard drinking town. And it's very interesting for me to see kind of the judgments that exist, like among people who are heavy drinkers, but they don't do other substances, and how judgmental they are about people who do. Mm-hmm. And then also in the gay male community, there's recently kind of this whole association of meth with hooking up, and that whole sort of, that's how you explore your sexuality. And then the really judgy kind of people who either are totally horrified by that and want to persecute people for it, or who are totally adamant and no, this is what I'm going to do. So anyway, I want to continue this conversation, but I want to welcome Emma Curtis, who is our 4th District Councilwoman, independent filmmaker, and LGBTQ plus activist. Hi, Emma.
Hi, thank you for having me. Sorry I'm a bit late.
Yeah, no, you're right on time because we're just going wherever. So we're talking about substance abuse, kind of its ties to the culture and how it interacts with our identity, our sense of identity, and also how we structure our morality, maybe, or our ethics as a community. So who wants to jump in next? Rainbow?
Well, I think it's important to note when you look at those statistics, and yes, there is higher, alcohol and drug use in the gay and queer community, that sometimes that can be pointed to like as some kind of failure on us, but really it's let's look at the system that created that. So when you're constantly hearing narratives about you are no good, unworthy, going to hell, all of that. Well, that is what causes, especially in, teens and young adults, very impressionable. You're hearing all these mixed messages about your own value, then of course you would be more leaning towards well, my life doesn't matter anyway. I have to censor myself.
Yeah, well, and I think along that line, though, what Kyle said earlier, it's also kind of the liquid courage idea.
Yeah.
It's feeling all that heaviness, and then you go and you have a drink or you do something else, and suddenly you're free and you're light, and everybody's dancing, and there's glitter and it's sparkling.
Feel that aliveness and that safety for the first time, often in a gay bar. Mm-hmm. And then you start to associate, well, this is the place I can go and be free, and these are my people. And because it was like the gay culture, especially, back, 60s, 70s, more underground, and then that would be a place you could go and be safe and be with your people. And then it gets associated with that. And then, with any kind of addictive substance, then you start thinking that starts to take over more than what I think really is the glue and the joy and the queer joy is in the community and the power of being free and being together. And not that there's anything wrong with going out and partying and drinking too, if you like that, but just to notice where that edge is to then when it becomes destructive in your life, and how can you still create what you're actually seeking and actually needing beyond the bar scene.
And I think I think a lot of times it's cast in that negative light of, gay people are so tortured and all of this. But I think a lot of times the addictiveness is chasing the high of the freedom and that sort of thing, and that's what sucks you in deeper. But anyway, enough.
Okay, so can I touch on that topic? Mm-hmm. Because let me tell you what, honey, I am ready to let the faucets flow.
All right.
So that right there, I am so grateful that Rainbow brought that up, because that's what got me into drag. That's why I went to the clubs, to the bars, because it was a place for me to express myself. At that time, I had no idea that I was truly trans, but now I know. Hindsight's always 20/20. But it's like saying, like, that was the safe space. And then it wasn't until a couple years ago, like to bring back up Wanda's point, I was roofied. Mm-hmm. And I was roofied at a place that I thought I would never be roofied at. Yep. And I was roofied, and I thought that I would never be the one to be roofied. I'm 6'5". I'm Corabelle BJ. Like, I'm, this drag queen extraordinaire. Everybody loves me. No, not everybody loves you. You have to love yourself. And so, like, that hypervigilance comes into play. And then also, I think the thing that was really hard for me is this competition and this mindset of, I have to be better than you, or you have to be better than me, or we have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way. And then that brings in substance use. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's a train station in there for how many different substances get on and get off inside certain different places. And it's really understanding that at the heart of that, it's just because people don't really know how to express themselves. They don't know how to like love themselves. And also finding that safety too, because there have been so many times like in my life that I went into a spiritual realm or a spiritual place, and yet that's where my traumas happened. Mm-hmm. And that's where I say no one should ever have to lose their virginity in a church. Mm-hmm. And so also that's where I've been doing a lot of deeper diving and seeing, like, you know, the Hebrew word, or wait, what is it? In Hebrew, alcohol stands for dead spirit. So, like, you know, at the core, there's a whole deeper kind of thing here, and understanding, like, so there's alcohol, but then there's also cannabis that comes straight from the ground. Mm-hmm. You know, just seeing also, I'm a Gemini, so I'm always looking at polarities too. But like just seeing those kinds of things play out as well.
Yeah, for sure. And an entire 2-hour episode could be done on the whole drag experience, and that are, you know, the structures and the politics. And you're not, I don't think you are alone. I know several drag queens who have eventually come out as trans because there wasn't language for it earlier, and now there is kind of more language for it. But I remember way back, again, because I'm old, when drag queens who had body modification to be more female were judged by the other drag queens as not being real. You know, this is an illusion. You're taking it too seriously. You're doing whatever. It's just amazing how judgy people can be. But anyway, again, I don't want to dominate the conversation. Who else wants to jump in? Logan?
Yeah. So when I think about substance abuse, especially when you factor religion, and because I was such a product of the 90s, right? Like there was such this like, don't you ever take a drink of alcohol. And so some of it too, I think, is like people didn't feel free to be themselves. And so they're like, when they get out of this vice grip that they found themselves in through religion and things, and they've just completely abandoned who they were, and they all of a sudden they get some of this freedom. Next thing you know, there is a lot that they're experimenting with, and they don't know their limits. And I think you said something brilliant earlier, Rainbow, when you were talking about ego getting in. I think that's kind of a root of all of it, right? Is like, you can't really deal with the problem until you recognize you're part of the problem idea. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I think of when I think about substance abuse, is like, it's very personal, and I have no expertise to diagnose anyone, but I do think that we can all be aware of when our ego's at play in something.
Mm-hmm. Emma, do you have anything to add to this? Jump in.
Sure. I'll just say that as somebody who grew up in the church and was very much a product of purity culture, right? This idea of just one slip up and you're done, essentially. It led to these feelings of just deep-rooted shame, and the feeling that if anybody were to find out the way that I was in private, be that as, you know, a trans woman, be that as a queer person, or be that, you know, when I was in college, I was putting back 15 shots a night alone in my room because that was the thing that I felt that I needed to do. It just created this shame. And then you get to this point where it's you hide it. And in a strange twist of events for me, it was developing a healthier relationship with substances, with alcohol in particular. And doing so made me able to overcome the shame that I felt about my own gender, about my own sexual orientation. And I think that a lot of it's the same root cause there, right? The shame that I felt about being trans and the shame that I felt about using substances were rooted in that same spiritual idea, which is a misplaced idea that somehow we are to be perfect.
Right.
And, coming from the Christian tradition, I know that none of us are perfect. Definitionally speaking, we're all aspiring to be more Christ-like, but we're all going to mess up. We're all going to stumble and fall along the way. And there's not anything to be gained spiritually from shame.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we're going to transition into our next segment where we're really going to, we've been talking about religion and spirituality kind of on the fringes of all of this. But as a transition, I want to talk to our mental health folks and our spiritual folks for that matter. In talking about substance abuse, there's sort of the flip side, which is recovery. And for a lot of people, recovery is the place, I know it was for me, where I started to heal from a lot of the religious trauma. Because 12-step is not for everybody, but for the people it is. The idea that you are the only person who has the authority over your relationship with whatever you consider a higher power to be. And that's very powerful if you are coming from a lot of religious trauma. So I'm just curious to hear, especially from the mental health folks, when you talk to your clients about recovery, about sobriety versus, reduced harm, all that kind of stuff, what do you do, and what are also the kind of the spiritual aspects of that?
Mm-hmm. I would say most of my clients have not wanted to talk about substance use or recovery. For them, they've kind of that's a part of who they are or their life, and they're not looking to change that. But when they are, we kind of do talk about, like, what is your reason? What is your why for recovery and being or staying sober? For some of my clients, several have religious traumas, so it's really hard to talk about that unless they're open to it. But the ones who are open to spirituality usually have some sort of like self-directed spirituality, such as tarot cards or something that they can do on their own, or they don't want to be a part of a church or a religious community necessarily, but they want to do what they can that works for them and what they can do on their own time and in their own way. So in that sense, we typically will use whatever works for them, and then also being able to work through trusting themselves and, thinking about their higher or highest self, and a self that, has been able to kind of like figure out what's best for themselves and get in tune with that. And, it's kind of like being authentic and in alignment with that truth, and all those, qualities kind of come together to be able to help them work through it and talk about it in a very unique way, because like we kind of specialize with the queer community. So we've been able to see patterns on a larger scale than maybe providers who maybe see a few queer people here and there. But for us, we've seen that being able to talk about it in a way where, they learn to trust themselves as their own guide in life, I think has been helpful for most of the people I've worked with.
Okay. Any of you other folks, Wanda, Corabelle, in your experience?
I have an interesting take on it because, I look at a lot of the substance use that we have is normalized in terms of saying, in terms of THC, THCA, weed, old-fashioned weed. Sometimes it's this thing where you notice, like, okay, hold on. How does this work for you? This isn't a problem for you, so I can't make it a problem for you to solve. So, okay. So part of my, information gathering is, substance use. What kind of, you drink, you smoke weed, you smoke tobacco, what do you do? And making it a point to normalize and not judgment, not, put any judgment to it, because people won't be honest about their substance use on a piece of paper. But if you ask them, they tend to be more honest. I talk about it with people in terms of, let's use it as a skill. Let's use it as a breathing skill. We're going to do 3 deep breaths, but this is how you do this on your bong, or this is how you do this way. What kind of strain are you using? This is how the chemicals in the weed affect the chemicals in the medication that you're taking. So let's be aware of what we're doing and be mindful of that, because you remember having that outburst. Okay, what happened? So you were high, you weren't eating, you weren't hydrated. Oh, let's talk about harm reduction, because I'm not trying to tell you to stop smoking until we realize it's become a problem.
But I think that's what and they talk about that in recovery circles, but it's the magical thinking that you don't stop and look at the reality or understand the cause and effect. So, Corabelle.
And I think like intention with everything too, like that's the thing that has been so hard for me is like, especially on my own spiritual recovery journey, everything is not like recovery is non-linear. Like there is no guidebook, there is no step-by-step direction that I can hand everybody out here to say you can do it this way, because it is different for everyone. And I think the thing that has been so powerful for me is like understanding that now that I've also been able to live more authentically and be myself, it helps me understand too why I was doing some of the things in the past. Also noticing like the medications that I was taking and the medications that I was getting side effects from, and how one of the side effects, it literally felt like my whole body, I was burning from the inside out. And they were like, well, we have to titrate you off of this. You can't just stop. And I'm like, what? I'm literally burning alive. Like, what is going on right now? And then to see now, like, finding out about different strains of marijuana, finding out about things that are more holistic too, and understanding that, you know, it can be a form of medicine. And I always, every time I talk to some of my clients, I'm very open about, you know, my cannabis use. Like, and I also say, my aunt says, enough's enough and too much is nasty. So you know your limit. And if you start to feel like, you know, you're about to break that ice, then baby, get off the pond. It's not time to go skating. So it's like understanding and knowing and being able to trust your inner self and your guidance that way too.
All right. And Logan and Rainbow, from a more pastoral perspective, how would you say that you encounter folks?
Sure. From my perspective, it's really more about guiding people towards their own inner beliefs and kind of getting to what you may call those core beliefs of unworthiness or, you know, feeling not good enough, and where the healing opportunity often, you know, the substance use can be a Band-Aid and or a bridge. And when someone's really ready to go deep and to sit with the pain and the emotion and actually feel your feelings, which usually get suppressed or ignored with substance use, then it's like a lot more fun to not have to think about those things and those traumas, but to really heal and to come back to our inherent wholeness and worthiness. You know, it's walking people through that process gently. You don't want to just rip the Band-Aid off and then you're sitting there like, I can't deal with all of this and all the memories and everything that may come up. But just kind of noticing, where is it suppressing? You know, being conscious, what is your intention before you go to use something? Like, what am I really needing right now to feel safe, to feel comfort, to relax? Is there another way I could do that? You know, call a friend, snuggle a pet, take a walk. And do I believe I'm worthy enough to make that healthy choice for myself? And there's so many layers to it. But that's what short answer.
Logan, what would you like to add?
Yeah, really what I have been advocating for, because I've been a part of different recovery ministries for different, like, my own codependency issues and other things of myself. What I really advocate for is that people feel brave enough, because, you know, I struggle with the idea of there being a safe space because that's just too relative. But can someone feel brave enough to have a conversation, to just be in the same room with someone as they're going through it, with whatever they're going through? And because that really is what points them to something higher than themselves, is oftentimes they don't need words, they just need someone. They need to feel connection more than they need a lecture from me who knows really doesn't understand what they're going through of how to quote unquote fix a problem that I don't know how to fix. And I think especially Christianity has spent a lot of time telling people how to believe instead of actually getting people to Jesus in their terms. Mm-hmm. And that's really what's more beautiful. You know, I mean, like the one picture of recovery we really have in the Bible is like people tearing off a roof and like the person couldn't walk themselves. They're on a mat and getting them to Jesus. Like that's the picture. It's not, it's actually being there for someone and helping them find their way.
Well, and this is a good place, I think, for us to go to our next break. But I'm going to say something now, and I want it to kind of inform where we go. Because I am in a 12-step fellowship, and I have been for many, many years. And I notice in that, and I think it's a reflection of larger things, is people approach spirituality, religion, either from a perspective that's sort of like Old Testament, legalistic, this is the right way to do things, there is a right way to do things, and that sort of thing. And then you have people who approach spirituality from a mystic standpoint, where it's all like the cloud of unknowing, the discovery of it's a very personal discovery thing. So when we come back, I think that's kind of a place that we can open into our discussion about spirituality. And so please stay tuned. This is The Deep End, and we will be back after these messages.
You are listening to MEDIALEX Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky.
MEDIALEX is a platform for community-created programming. The views and opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the voices on air. They do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of MEDIALEX or its board of directors, nor JustFundKY or its board of directors. And we are back. You are listening to The Deep End, a special sponsored by JustFundKY, and we are talking about complex topics that are of interest to the LGBTQ plus community. And tonight we've been talking about identity, substance abuse, spirituality, and how all these things are connected. And in our last segment, we were exploring the way that substance use, substance abuse, and recovery all have at some point spiritual underpinnings. But now we're really going to dig into queer faith and spirituality, religion. As we've discussed, for many LGBTQ plus people, religion is a source of trauma and harm. And so people kind of approach an alternative spirituality, a self-directed spirituality, and some people, it's important to say, have no interest in either, and they don't want anything to do with any of it. And that might be trauma related, or it might just be because they truly come from an agnostic, atheistic standpoint. So that could be said of anybody in our entire culture or community. So how do those topics hold more weight in the LGBTQ plus community? I think, as we talked about earlier, just the religious political rhetoric adds some weight to the queer experience of spirituality. But I want to hear from you all. Let's just jump into the topic of religions, the trauma that might come from it, spirituality, how that starts to get healed, what are alternative structures. And maybe we'll start on this side. Logan, let's start with you, if you have anything to say.
Yeah, as someone who, it's kind of funny in my title of being a director of a church, because it's actually like, I hold my breath every time I'm driving in. And and then it gets even worse when I have to walk inside the building. I hold my, I know, I work there, and yet it's so painful because the only career I've ever been terminated from was a church, and it was for being queer, right? And so there's this, so every time I walk in to any kind of church building, it's like this, like, am I really myself? Am I really safe? You know, like the idea of like you, the fight, fly or freeze, and I'm always like wanting to like fly away, like just get me out of this. I think it's interesting, and I want to speak to Christianity specifically here instead of just keeping it, is what I found a path forward of how I can be involved and be in a community that is really loving, and it's just, yeah, I'm just going to shamelessly give boomers and the silent generation a little bit of credit here. Like, it's good to know that there are progressive elderly people. I've been fortunate in my life and my personal family that I've had some of that, but you know, you don't see that often. A lot of the people I know tragically have a lot of horror stories on that front. So it's really cool to be around a group of people that is genuinely loving. But I think for the Christianity part of it is you have to embrace a part of agnosticism with it, because you don't know big answers. You don't. I don't know how to justify God or Jesus with Gaza. I don't know how to do it with a literal nationalistic assault on queer people and on trans people specifically. And like we talked about earlier, like, why are we bullying trans people? Like, I thought America was about freedom. Like, I thought, like, you know, like, I mean, you hear a lot of griping about feeling like you can't say what you want to say. And I'm like, okay, but you're literally trying to take away everything from these people. So I think you have to kind of reckon with the fact that there's part of this we're not going to know answers to. And that can actually make us more faithful leaning into uncertainty than actually having knowing. And maybe that's more Christian.
Well, and I think there's a dynamic there, because I think you see religion as one of the places where it happens often. If you think about Protestants, Catholics, or the Sufi Muslims versus the more conservative Muslims, I think something about othering is built into our human instinct. And I think for the mystic approach to religion, it's dissolving that and breaking it down. And for the more legalistic side, it's how to purify that, or how to become, you know, how to get to the point you want to be. But anyway, Rainbow, you were about to say something?
Yeah, so I'm currently reading Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upwards, and he talks about the 2 stages of life. And in the beginning, the need, just like children have the need to learn the rules and the structures of society and certain things, and you need the order, you need the ritual. But then when you mature, and when you mature spiritually as well, the invitation is to realize we don't really know anything, and to step into the mystery, to lean into uncertainty, and begin to cultivate a more personal experience with yourself and the divine. And I definitely tend to live more in that space of the mystical. I'm ordained with Centers for Spiritual Living, not specifically Christian, not a dogmatic religious upbringing, more of a space of what is your own personal understanding of this thing called life. And I tend to lean more into nature as a guide, and oneness, and how we're all connected. And what I think is particularly interesting, and the space that I'm looking to create with Queer Spirit Collective, is for queer folks, we have the opportunity and invitation to queer our entire lives. So I say this to mean those that have, embraced and have come out and, either within yourself or out in the world, we have a level of self-reflection and self-awareness and living life beyond the status quo that I think allows us to do that in other areas of our life, which is extremely beautiful and unique to the queer community, which I think allows us to be really awesome just to say it that way, but creative and spiritual, and getting to queer our lives in so many ways in our own spiritual practice too. Like, it doesn't have to be this box in this way. It's taking a little of this and a little of that and what works for you. And then I think there's the whole benefit of spiritual community too, because I personally find connection so important in that sense of belonging that does come in doing ritual and spiritual practice collectively. And yet these days, there's spiritual teachings on YouTube, podcasts. There's so much information out there as the world's kind of waking up to more information that people can have access to stuff on their own as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Wanda?
Yeah. So I was thinking about how I talk about mindfulness as a spiritual practice with people, as clients who, have probably had their own histories with religious trauma and issues with the church and whatnot. But, I just remember, thinking about, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, we're queer in spirituality. Yeah. They don't like that neither. They don't like that neither. We done queered spirituality. We said, we going to take these crystals and we gonna do all kinds of, we're going to pick and choose, and we're going to have different deities that we're going to talk to, and we're going to have moon water, and we're going to do this. And I'm like, they don't like that neither. They're trying to police that too, because, I'm thinking legalistically, I'm thinking like, okay, what's by the book? So we're talking like, say, we, work with some folks who are in recovery and on that journey and on the hardest part of the journey, which is very black and white, and looking at spirituality, Old Testament even, thinking that this is how I need to live my life now, and it's all or nothing. And it's like, whoa, hold on. You get to pick and choose. You honestly do, because they've been doing it forever. They've been picking and choosing all this time. So you get to figure out spirituality for yourself and what that looks like, and you get to create the model. You get to take the clay and mold it, and it doesn't have to look like what you grew up with, or what I think a lot of queer folks are who are historians. We look at spirituality or religion and we go, there's the political aspect of religion too.
Sure,
that for years, and some people have been playing the long game, and it's finally been unleashed here in the past year officially. It's like, wow, that took a while. But we notice the political aspects that come from the church and the pulpit that have harmed us. And then we said, I can't go back to church being as gay as I am. I can't walk back up in there. They're gonna light me up. And, then we go home and we go, how can I make spirituality something that makes sense to me? But some people don't even get there. Because, I'm looking at my politicians as, the Christian ones, but they're also pigeonholing me and telling me I can't go to the bathroom at certain places. And then I don't know who to look to, because the pastor and the politician are in the same pocket. And I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to trust.
Well, and let me jump in and then we'll continue, but I want to jump back to something that Rainbow said, and that's about part of the mystic approach to things is leaning into uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that as human beings, we really don't like to do. And so the alternative to dealing with uncertainty can be substance abuse, like what we were talking about, because that gives you some artificial sense of control about things. But the other is how it expresses itself on the legalistic side, because it is about power and it's about control. And also knowing the rules. That's very comforting to people. And there are some people, some deeply spiritual people I know, who live by that rule, and that's what informs their spirituality. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic. But Emma, you were going to say something, and I jumped in.
No, sure. Just speaking as, unless I missed something, the only politician in the room, and a politician who's also Christian, who's also trans. One of the things that's been particularly infuriating about this rise, especially in recent years, in Christian nationalism is this sort of co-opting of what to me has been something really beautiful, something where I can find this sort of faith by people who, like, it's. I don't think if you ask the majority of the legislators in the Kentucky General Assembly, they would have understood that I was sworn in on my family Bible with my mom holding it. So there is part of me that feels a lot of anger, because just in the same way you're telling me I can't be trans, you're telling me I also now can't be Christian.
Right.
And I think that for a lot of people, it comes back to those boxes, right? It comes back to the legalistic side of things. But even if you look at the legalistic side of things, the book of Galatians tells us in chapter 3, verse 28, there is neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female, for we are all one in Jesus Christ. And so when we are coming at this from a political standpoint, we need to understand that it is a deeply damaging thing to run from our faith as sincerely held, religious or otherwise, because there are others who are seeking to use that as a wedge to divide, to use it as a tool or a weapon against people that for other reasons they do not like. And I think that there are this cultural shift. I mean, and it's been a 50-year project specifically with the Republican Party's co-opting of Christianity in the United States. You know, this goes back decades and decades and decades, and it's not coming out of nowhere. We've seen this before, and in the same way that we are seeing attacks on trans folks now, we saw attacks on gay folks during the AIDS crisis, right? It's, I will joke that, and I say joke, but Donald Trump is the fulfillment of Ronald Reagan's greatest dreams in a lot of ways, and that being one of them, and navigating these spaces, I believe, like, wholeheartedly, whether you're religious or not, we all need faith. And when we're talking about this idea of certainty, right, what does nationalism or authoritarianism feed on? It's certainty. It's the desire to sacrifice freedom for a feeling of security. And a lot of those same underpinnings can be found in that religious sense. But at the same time, I think that you can be religious without faith. And I think that if you are accepting your religion as fact, and you're accepting it as certain and unchanging, then that in and of itself is a repudiation of faith, because faith can't coexist with absolute certainty.
And I'm going to take this moment to, again, just say the disclaimer here. Everybody here is expressing personal opinions. None of the opinions represented here today are the official opinions of either MEDIALEX or our board of directors or JustFundKY. These folks have provided a space for us to have a conversation in, and the conversation and the opinions of the people speaking are theirs only. So with that disclaimer out of the way, one thing, Emma, that you said that I always loved about Joseph Campbell's one of my heroes. And he talks about the calcification of symbol. Yeah. And that's really when you take the faith out of religion and it becomes this very, rigid, dry, crumbly thing, because you've lost the thread of what it's all about. But anyway, anybody else want to jump in here?
I will totally jump in here because
Great.
I think that this is a wonderful point to... a wonderful place to bring up how also, like, the rhetoric that is being pushed around, especially from the King James Version of the Bible, is nothing but a sacred weapon. And also, I will plug this. 1946, there's a little movie out there. You should check it out. It will tell you everything that you need to know, because the thing that I never understood, especially growing up, is I thought Jesus was king, so why do we have the King James version of the Bible? And then the more and more I get to looking in, I see, wow, King James was not a very nice individual. And then also King James, Jamestown? King James is, as my papa would say, funny or queer. You know, like, that's the thing that I don't understand. It's like, how can we continue to utilize this rhetoric whenever it's just complete hypocrisy? And at the base of all of these metaphors is literally the understanding of going within yourself to find out who you truly are and to be that representation of Christ, of, and you know what, we'll leave that Jesus out of it, of Buddha, of Gandhi, like all of these people, because that is who you can be. And I'm always telling like the people that I see, like, being trans is just awesome, because I think like that in itself is a divine and sacred act. Just like every single individual walking around on here, listening on here, everyone is all divine and sacred. And something I heard from Rainbow a while back, thank you for being a reflection of me, because we are all reflections of each other. And if we are reflections of each other, then oop, there it is. We're also reflections of the divine. So how in the world can we literally go and like try to judge another whenever you're only judging part of yourself? And that's why I say also setting boundaries is good too. And like being able to advocate for yourself. And what is it? I always tell the clients and also some of my friends, like, you know, if you block somebody on Instagram, you're only blocking part of yourself. But do it, you know, like do it. You know, we need to be able to have that sanity and that safety. So, but it's just understanding too, like a lot of that rhetoric is just rhetoric. And if we're looking at the, like, we can quote verses, we can do all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, like Rainbow said, like, what are those core values, those core principles, those things going on?
Wanda?
I was thinking about something. It might have been a rhetorical question from you, but I was thinking, oh, well, the reason why they keep doing that is supremacy. You know, because it's always been about we have to be better. We have to be more. And then there is a concept, like a psychological concept, which is really interesting because it's like, that's total manipulation. That's dark psychology that you put it in somebody's head. I fully believe that white supremacy was based on 5 dudes that came together and said, we need to be better than everybody else. We can't be out here in these fields with these blacks and be treated the same. We got to do something better. We got to be better than that. Well, let's give people a notion that they're better than somebody else. And let's use religion let's use Christianity in it. Let's pick and choose out of this here book, the King James Version, to condemn a whole lot of people. Let's put a lot of people in their place. So it's really a thing about supremacy. We need to be better and we need to take over and we need to also, what I'm understanding, like I'm looking at the news a lot differently, and I'm like, what is this tone that I'm getting? It's a survival instinct that's coming out of whiteness that's always been there that says we need to protect us. And I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on. So when you got here, you didn't know how to do anything. And the brown people knew how to do everything. And you took all those skills from those people, and you took literally everything from them. You still couldn't survive. But you still needed to make sure that you were over them. You needed to be dominant over somebody else. How do we do that? Religion. How do we do that? Well, we need to be coercive as all get out and pick and choose out of this here book. That King James said, we're going to condemn a whole lot of women. Why? Just because we're going to put them in their place. So either way, it's like there's something like, okay, the queerness of it all. I think that's the bit that we figured out a long time ago, that supremacy was the problem. And dominance and oppression were issues in there. And we kept seeing oppression throughout this book. And we go, wait a minute, how come somebody's supporting this? Why do we keep going back to this? Well, because somebody has to be better than another group.
Well, and I want to jump in here because that idea is even older than the King James Version. That is really medieval thinking. And especially in Western culture, it kind of all goes back to the divine right of kings. That whoever is in power, God put them there because God wanted them there. And then that has just kept on, and there's like the whole, I forget what it is, Emma, you probably know, the thing about settling America, divine providence or whatever it is that...
Manifest destiny.
Manifest destiny, exactly. And so I don't know if anybody here watches the show The Boys, but their, I mean, like biting, sarcastic take on things, but it was like the American church. Because, Jesus was just a little too wimpy. And we need to be, the American church that stands for, our values. And it was brilliant satire and so biting because it gets to the heart of that. It's like there is something in believing that you are ordained by God to be doing whatever you're doing. Yeah. And that plays out in a lot of different ways with a lot of different people and a lot of different other things. Kyle, I don't want to... You've been sitting. I'm waiting to hear what you're going to...
Oh, yes. It's been percolating. So I have a few thoughts. One is that there's a part of the community we haven't quite acknowledged in this discussion. We've talked about the queer community, the people who have religious trauma and are like, I don't want anything to do with it. We've talked about the queer community who have been able to embrace it and welcome it into their lives. But there's also a part of the community I've met who are closeted and spiritual or closeted and religious because they're afraid to come out to friends or family or other queer people because they're afraid of being ostracized or somehow rejected or pushed out of the community because they have some sort of spiritual belief or faith or religion. We've seen that at the practice even. I see it on Facebook all the time. They don't want therapists or practices who embrace spirituality. But I always I don't always get on Facebook and say it, but I like to, talk to my colleagues or whatever and say, we're here for the whole community, even if they're not here for us. We're here to serve everyone and help everyone, even and especially people who are open to spirituality, because for them, that's helping them heal. And we also respect the people who do not want to talk about that. We don't push it. We don't, people have trauma. We do too. We don't want to push that. But, I just want that to be something that the listeners hear, that there are people in our community who are keeping it to themselves because of how they get treated if they openly share that. So, and they might be listening, and I want them to know that we hear and see them too. Like if they feel like they're alone, you're not. You have people in the community who are also spiritual or maybe religious, and, it doesn't have to feel like you're by yourself.
And I think I've known some people also who are active members in denominations that tend to be very homophobic, transphobic, and I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance or they're just like, it's like that's not a problem. It's like I'm myself and I know why I'm here for the spirituality, and there's just, they can move through those spaces. And it's sort of the opposite of being closeted about it. It's like I'm aware that I'm gay, but I'm still going to be here. I've got a right to be here, and lots of different rationales behind it. But I've always found that fascinating too. All right. Well, that's sort of like a place where it seems like we've kind of come to a pause. So as we are kind of moving towards the end of the show, we started talking in the last segment about bars and that being a place where, the queer community traditionally has kind of come together. Churches, not so much until recently. But how does religion and spirituality show up in queer spaces, in queer relationships, in ways that it doesn't in the broader culture? Like, how do we manage spirituality in our lives that's different from the way other people do it because we are queer? Rainbow?
I just love that question, and it's sparking curiosity in me. So it's not like I necessarily have an answer, but I think that that's a fun thing to explore. And a short answer would just be it shows up very magically and mystically, I think, and organically. and playfully, and whatever the opposite of rigid by the book rules. It's more like, let's get curious, let's explore, let's discover.
Okay.
Yeah, so in my process of becoming Logan, I shameless plug for the Not Sorry group, and they have multiple podcasts out there. But something Vanessa Zoltan taught me and Castro Turkile taught me very early on was that you can see the sacred in anything, because what makes something sacred is people. And that's why we can really put energy and life into anything, and that means God is in anything. So you referenced The Boys earlier. I also watched The Boys because I do think that outside of satire, I think there's a lot that it has to offer from a sacred place, even through very colorful language and fun, you know? I mean, I don't... The other beauty in this is like, this also gives us the ability within ourselves to extend grace to real human interactions, because we can hold these characters and these people that we emotionally invest in, whether you're reading a book or you're watching something, and you can be like, I want this character to do better, so that when someone doesn't treat you that way, you have the ability to offer grace that you didn't have before. And so I think one of the biggest things that's missing out is that we miss actually seeing spirituality in everything and in our everyday lives.
I think queer people figured out how to do something really neat, which is how to queer everything.
Yep.
So, spirituality, doesn't look like going to a building necessarily anymore on a Sunday morning or afternoon or a Wednesday evening. It's more like, hey, I want to put on this furry costume and go down and have a good time with my friends. Yeah. And that's spiritual. Yeah. That's an expression. That's people. That's connection. That's, hey, I want to go to a silent rave and dance with people and just enjoy life. I think the secret to a lot of this, like as I've been thinking about, how do we decolonize therapy and decolonize some of these aspects of service that we provide to people, because we're experts, quote unquote, yes, but then the people that we serve are also experts on their own life. So it's like, I can't tell you what to do in terms of connecting to the spiritual side of yourself. I can work with you on figuring out how do you have fun, because that's what I think the secret is when we come down to the self-work. It's about how do we get to the stable point where we figure out how to play again? We lost the capacity how to play once we got to be grown, because we were fighting to be grown, and then, oh man, we can't play no more. So we had to figure out how to slow down and do the things and people together, and have a sense of fun together. I think that's what spirituality really kind of encompasses, that a lot of people forget about.
Well, I want to jump in because of what Logan and Wanda just talked about, because something that's very spiritually meaningful to me is the Hindu idea of Leela, which is the divine play, that everything is. So even the yucky parts, even the dark parts, even the harmful parts, they're all part of the divine, the Shiva creation destruction thing. And and if you want to talk about radical acceptance, that's a place to kind of start. Not that you don't set boundaries and make sure that people aren't being harmed, but that's deep play. That's a huge thing about deep play.
And that brings up that whole ideology of, what does the Bible say? Be grateful in all things, honey. Because I think like that's it. And just being able to be that child again, to be curious about life, to be able to see that, it's not that deep at the end of the day. It's literally just a bunch of stress and emotion that we're piling into our bodies. And so finding those ways to release it. And I think as queer individuals, like for me, like drag, art, anything that I can do to express myself and have fun, I will do, because literally, I've said literally like 5 times now, but literally, I feel though that it is like that, what you said, the divine play, and just getting back to that and making sure that you can, just be with that inner child that sometimes gets left behind, because like you said, Wanda, we grow up so fast and like, trying to always protect, but then it's like, no, I'm ready to be here, be queer, and stand for what I want to, because honey, like, I'm deserving of that.
Emma, or Kyle, jump back in.
What came to my mind, I'm not well versed in the spiritual lingo, but what came to my mind was that I feel like the queer community has a way of being able to transmute or use alchemy with spirituality and religion and make things work for them or be in alignment with their authentic truths. Whereas maybe other communities would rather the religion tell them how to be or what to do. Usually the queer community would rather be able to use spirituality in a way that enhances their life and their truth as who they are.
Well, and I think there's a lot of privilege in the straight experience because everything's laid out. There's a plan, there's a life plan, and a lot of that's tied to religion. Like you go to college, you get married, you have kids, and so it's all prescribed. And you can deviate from it, but it's there if you want it. And in the queer experience, it's not. It's make it up as you go along for a lot of it. Emma, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, don't apologize. I think that's an excellent point to make. And really what it comes down to for me when we talk about queerness and spirituality, it is that, once again, that being queer in and of itself is an act of creation. Being trans is an act of creation, and an act of creation is that act of faith without certainty. And you are trusting that what you're doing, even though it wasn't prescribed for you, is going to take you to a place that is closer to you, that is closer to God or whatever higher power or collective unconscious that you believe in, that you find strength in. And I think that is a really beautiful thing, that at the end of the day, being queer is just an act of faith.
Yeah,
That's great. And I want to, because I just have this, rebellious, anti-authoritarian, punky side of myself. I want to, everybody's been talking about queering spirituality, and it makes me think that our sort of spiritual lineage comes from the great mythic tricksters, the people who change identity, who swap genders, that's kind of what queer spirituality is. It shakes up reality. Yeah. And that's a very powerful spiritual archetype and experience that's kind of needed. So anyway. All right, we are at the end of our time, so I want to give everybody a chance to do a parting shot. I appreciate the conversation. I think it's been great. So if you are with a counseling place or a spiritual place, feel free in your parting shots to say your website, where your information is, if people want to learn more. There are resources, and there are spiritual resources for folks in our community, and I think that's important to know. So Kyle, I'm going to start with you, and we'll go around and end with Rainbow.
All right. So my parting thoughts are just to encourage everyone to be who they are and to live their truth, whether that's being spiritual or not, or religious or not. You are loved and celebrated as you are. And there's always someone listening and paying attention and watching, so please be who you are and, shine some light into the world. And the Open Doors Counseling Center website is opendoorscounselingctr.com if you want to learn more about what we offer.
Great. Thanks. Kyle? Corabelle?
So one of the things that I want to say to all the peeps out there, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to us and just giving us that time to, spark some curiosity within you. And be that child that you've always wanted to be. So if you want that Lisa Frank folder, honey, you get it. If you want to go out there and you want to catch that Pokemon, you catch it. Because, baby, you can do it. And also, if you want to do drag, get in contact with me. By the way, CorabelleBJ.com. That's where you can find me. But another thing is like, just be your most authentic self. Because at the end of the day, like Taylor Swift says, you're on your own, kid.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Emma?
Sure. I guess my parting thought is that the undercurrent that I noticed throughout all of our conversations, whether it was about queerness, spirituality, faith, mental health, addiction, substance abuse, what have you, is that we all benefit when we have some humility and a willingness to meet each other where we're at. Yes. So I hope that wherever you're at, if you're listening to this in your journey with substance abuse, with faith, with queerness, with whatever you're going through, that you will extend the opportunity for folks to meet you where you're at and extend an open hand and meet other folks where they're at, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. And you can find out more about me at emmaforlex.com, and I am at Emma Curtis Lex on social media, not Twitter, because I do value my sanity.
Wanda.
Yeah, so I also, second the sentiment. Thank you for listening to our thoughts about these different things, these different topics about queering spirituality. A parting thought, I think, is about remembering that we're like clay and we can be molded. Just be mindful about how you're being molded by the influences that are outside of you and the ones that are inside of you. That's the stuff that we keep working on. And a bit of free therapy, the two best things that you can lean into are rest and play that we forget about.
Beautiful.
Something I would like to plug for Open Doors Counseling is an offshoot from my private practice, Spill the Tea, which is a self-love group that I've come up with called Spill the Tea, ironically. That is every other Monday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at our Open Doors building here in Lexington. It is a connection group. It's not therapy, but it is a connection group for women of color who need to maybe let your hair down a little bit, have a relaxation time, also meeting yourself where you are when the world doesn't want to meet you where you are. I think that's a concept we can all lean into for healing.
Great, Wanda. All right, Logan?
I just want to echo that it's just beautiful to get to talk with people who just bring so much joy and energy to my life. Thank you all for listening. And kind of my parting word that I'll give is you get to write your name on the map of the world wherever you are on your queer journey, because that's all we're all trying to do. We just want to exist. And the tragedy for queer people is we weren't given a utensil to write our name when everyone else was. So this is your chance to put your mark on the world. You can find info about me at bpclex.org. I am on Instagram. It's totally private, though, so you will have to send me a direct message if you want me to follow you.
Reverend Rainbow.
Yes. Oh, this is so good. The energy in this room is alive, and I love it. And I love the community and the conversation. And my parting words are simply be you, because no one else can. You are loved, you are beautiful, you are whole, you are needed, and just as you are. And would love to invite you to check out Queer Spirit Collective at queerspiritcollective.com, which will point you to our Substack page. So find us on Substack, also on School, SKOOL, and you can find me on Instagram at Rev Rainbow, as well as at Queer Spirit Collective.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. You have made this evening and this special. And again, this is The Deep End. It is a special show that we're doing here at MEDIALEX, talking about issues of importance to the LGBTQ plus community. It is sponsored by JustFundKY, and we want to thank them. And I want to thank our guest, who you've heard this evening, Kyle May, who is the founder of Open Doors Counseling, Wanda McCants, who is the clinical director and therapist at Open Doors Counseling, also the Spill the Tea. Corabelle Hall, who is a drag artist and case manager and queer mystic, as we have learned. Reverend Rainbow Weldon, who is the spiritual director of the Queer Spirit Collective. Emma Curtis, who is our 4th District Councilwoman, an independent filmmaker and LGBTQ plus activist. And last but not least is Logan Kidwell-Lemons, who is the director of Woven Church, and that's a part of Beaumont Presbyterian. And I am Mark Royse, and I am your host, and we'll be back after these messages.
You are listening to MEDIALEX Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM, Lexington, Kentucky.